Hello, NDE narrator. I am sending you this painful testimony with joy. My name is Aisha. I am 29 years old, and I was born in the northern part of Nigeria. My story is not an ordinary one because my life has been divided between two different worlds. On one side, I grew up as the daughter of a wealthy Muslim gold exporter in Nigeria, a man with strong political influence and a reputation that reached far beyond our town. He had many wives and many children, so I was just one among the crowd. On the other side, my life was shaped by the United States, where I moved at the age of 8, and where I learned what freedom, independence, and choice really meant. That combination of backgrounds made my childhood unique, but it also left me with wounds that money could not heal and questions that Islam never answered. Even though I was born into wealth, I grew up with emptiness. Growing up in northern Nigeria, I knew my father as a powerful man in society. He controlled access to gold mines and built his wealth through strong connections with politicians and religious leaders. His name carried weight, and people respected him wherever he went. But inside the home, things were different. Because he had so many wives and more than 20 children, his attention was divided, and in truth, he was absent in every way that mattered. As a female child, I felt even less important because in Islam, women are not valued equally to men. The atmosphere at home was strictly Islamic with Quran recitations, prayers at the mosque, and rules that were never questioned. My mother was one of his wives, and she played her role quietly, never arguing, never standing against the traditions. I felt invisible in that house, like an addition to the numbers, never like a child deeply loved. When I turned 8 years old, everything shifted. My father decided to send me to the United States for education. It was not out of love or closeness. It was because he had the means and connections to provide a Western education for his children, and I was simply one of those chosen. My mother traveled with me at first to settle me down, but after that, she returned to Nigeria, leaving me in the care of relatives and paid guardians. At such a young age, I was suddenly in a new country, in a culture that felt so far from what I had known. At first, it was overwhelming, the language, the freedom, the way children could ask questions and even disagree with adults without fear. But slowly I adapted. School became my world, and I started to enjoy the opportunities that came with education in America. I found comfort in books, in learning, and in the idea that I could choose who I wanted to be, something I never felt in Nigeria. My relationship with my father remained distant, almost non-existent. From the day I left Nigeria at 8 years old until much later in life, I never saw him face to face. He did not write letters, he did not call to check on me, and he never once asked about my progress in school. All I knew of him was through the money he sent regularly to my account. That was his way of being present in my life, not through love, not through guidance, but through financial provision. I came to accept it because I was too young to understand the difference between love and money, but deep inside, I always felt the void of not having a father's presence. My mother, on the other hand, visited occasionally. She would come to the US during holidays or summers, stay for a short time, and then return to Nigeria. Those visits felt temporary, like she was a guest in my life instead of a constant presence. I loved her, but even with her, I felt disconnected. Money quickly became the cover for the lack of family connection. My father made sure I had the best things, a comfortable home, access to quality schools, clothes, and whatever material possessions I wanted. As a child and teenager, I thought I was lucky compared to others who lacked these privileges. I could buy what I wanted, travel where I wanted, and live without worrying about financial needs. But as I grew older, I began to realize that money is not love. Money cannot fill the gap of a father's embrace or the support of a mother who listens when you cry. It cannot replace the laughter of siblings or the warmth of a family dinner. I had everything I wanted in terms of possessions, but I was still empty. My father's wealth made me secure on the outside, but inside, I was lonely, searching for meaning, searching for a connection that Islam, money, and family ties had failed to give me. At the age of 23, everything in my life looked perfect from the outside. I was in one of the best colleges in the United States, living in comfort, and never lacking anything money could buy. My father's financial provision never stopped, and I could afford the best of clothes, meals, and even vacations during school breaks. But inside, I was sinking. Depression hit me in a way I could not explain. Every morning, I would wake up with a heavy heart, questioning the point of life. I had friends around me. I was excelling in my studies, but there was no peace. The emptiness that I had felt as a child seemed to have grown louder, and I found myself crying for no reason, struggling with thoughts I could not even share. Despite all the wealth and opportunities, I felt like I was carrying a burden too heavy to explain. In that dark period, I began to notice the differences in how people treated me based on their faith. My Muslim friends were quick to judge or dismiss my feelings. To them, depression was either a lack of faith or a weakness that should be hidden, not spoken about. They often reminded me to read the Quran or to fast more, but they never truly listened to me. On the other hand, my Christian friends showed genuine care. They listened without judging me. They asked how I was doing every day, and they treated me like a sister, not an outsider. For the first time, I realized that even though I was a Muslim, the love and concern I needed were coming from Christians. That contrast planted a seed in my heart. I could see that the way Christians related with me was different from the coldness I had grown up with in Islam. It was kindness that felt real, not forced. One day, I gathered the courage to confide in a Christian coursemate who had always been kind to me. His name was Daniel, and I had known him since my second year in college. He noticed that something was wrong and asked me directly if I wanted to talk. For reasons I could not explain, I opened up to him about my depression, my struggles with loneliness, and how even though I had everything materially, I felt lost. Instead of dismissing me, he listened carefully and then asked if I would be willing to come with him to a fellowship meeting on campus. I hesitated because I was still a Muslim and I wore my hijab every day. I thought they would not accept me, but he assured me that no one would judge me, that they would pray with me and welcome me. Something inside me wanted to believe him, so I said yes. That decision turned out to be one of the most important steps in my journey. When I walked into that fellowship for the first time, I was shocked by what I found. No one looked at me with suspicion, no one asked me to remove my hijab, and no one treated me as though I was an enemy. Instead, they greeted me warmly, offered me a seat, and prayed for me without asking for anything in return. I sat quietly, watching them sing, worship, and lift their hands to God, and I felt a peace that I had never experienced in a mosque. They did not pressure me to convert. They did not make me feel less of a person because of my background, and they did not demand anything. They simply surrounded me with love, prayed for me, and told me that Jesus cared about me. Week after week, I kept going back, and each time, my heart grew lighter. In addition to the fellowship, I was referred to a student therapist on campus who happened to be a Christian. Her name was Rachel, and from the first session, she made me feel safe. Unlike the cold responses I had received from Muslims, Rachel showed me patience, warmth, and genuine concern. She did not only approach my depression from a psychological perspective, she also prayed for me quietly at the end of each session. She became more than a therapist. She became a friend. She would call me outside of sessions to check on me, invite me for coffee, and remind me that I was not alone. Slowly, with her help and the prayers from the fellowship, I began to heal. The heavy cloud over me started to lift, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Their acceptance and love, even though I was still a Muslim, touched me deeply and began to open my heart toward Jesus. When I began to recover from depression, it became clear to me that the love I had received was different from anything I had known before. The Christians on my campus did not care that I came from a wealthy Muslim family in Nigeria, or that I wore my hijab every day. They did not set conditions before showing me kindness. They loved me as I was, and they stood with me when I was at my lowest. The truth is, I had everything money could buy, yet I had never felt so empty until I met them. It was through their love, their prayers, and their patience that I realized Christianity was not about rules or empty rituals. It was about relationship with God and with people. That realization changed everything for me. I understood that the God they served was real because he was healing my heart and giving me peace. At that point, I knew I had to make a decision. I had been raised a Muslim all my life. I knew the Quran, I knew the expectations, and I knew how my family would react if they ever found out. But when I compared Islam with what I had found in Christ, the difference was undeniable. Islam gave me identity by name, but no dignity as a woman. It gave me money through my father, but no love as his daughter. Christianity, on the other hand, gave me freedom, peace, and a sense of belonging. For the first time, I felt seen and valued. I realized I could not keep living in the emptiness of my old life. So one evening after fellowship, I stayed behind with Rachel, the student therapist, and Daniel, the friend who had first invited me. With tears streaming down my face, I confessed Jesus as Lord. In that moment, I surrendered my life to him, and something heavy lifted from my shoulders. I walked away feeling like a new person. From then on, my life took a new turn. I no longer went to fellowship as a visitor. I went as a believer. I joined the choir, even though I was shy at first, and I started attending Bible study groups regularly. The scriptures came alive in a way I had never experienced before. Every passage I read spoke directly to me, teaching me about God's love and reminding me that I was not forgotten. I threw myself into the fellowship activities, eager to learn, eager to serve, and eager to grow. The joy I felt was new, and my heart burned with gratitude for the people God had used to lead me to him. They were no longer just friends, they became my family in Christ, and I held on to them as the anchor I had never known I needed. As my faith deepened, I started noticing how much need surrounded me, even in America. Many Christian students on campus came from struggling families. Some had trouble paying tuition, others struggled with rent, and a few were even working multiple jobs while trying to complete their studies. Meanwhile, money flowed into my account regularly from Nigeria, more than I needed to survive. For the first time, I felt that the money I once thought was my security could be used for something greater. Quietly, and without telling anyone where it came from, I began to use my father's money to support struggling Christian students. Sometimes I paid part of their tuition, sometimes I bought groceries, and other times I gave to the fellowship to fund outreach programs. It gave me joy to see the relief and gratitude on their faces, knowing God had used me to answer their prayers. The change in me was undeniable. The depression that once clouded my life disappeared completely. In its place came a joy I could not explain. I laughed more, smiled often, and woke up each morning with peace in my heart. The fear of being alone was gone, replaced by the assurance that Jesus was with me. I compared the emptiness I felt in my old life with the fullness I now carried, and I could not help but be grateful. My friends noticed the difference too, and even those who did not share my faith admitted that I had changed for the better. Life in Christ gave me dignity, purpose, and healing. I was no longer just the daughter of a wealthy Muslim man in Nigeria. I was now a child of God, saved by grace, and living with a hope that nothing in this world could take away. I received a call from my mother in Nigeria. She told me my father was about to be crowned the emir of his hometown, and that it was compulsory for me to be there. I had lived in the United States since I was 8, and I had never once seen my father face to face. The idea of finally meeting him after so many years brought mixed feelings. I had grown up detached from him, only knowing him as a rich Muslim man who exported gold and had many wives and children. Still, there was excitement in my heart. For once, I wanted to see the man who had shaped my life from afar with his money, but never with his presence. I packed my things and traveled to Nigeria, eager to witness history and reconnect with a part of my family I had been missing. The journey home was both overwhelming and strange. When I landed in Abuja, I was received by an entourage from my father's estate. For the first time, I felt the weight of his influence and power. The cars, the guards, the respect people gave his name. It was clear my father was not an ordinary man. When I arrived at his massive compound in the north, I saw more people than I could count. My siblings, cousins, imams, chiefs, and extended family members filled the place, all preparing for the coronation. I was ushered into a beautifully decorated room where my mother was waiting. and the moment I saw her, tears filled my eyes. It had been so long since I had seen her, and despite everything, she still carried the warmth of a mother. The reunion was emotional, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling of finally standing in the house of a man who had been absent from my life for nearly 2 decades. Meeting my father was an experience I will never forget. He sat in the center of the gathering, surrounded by elders and leaders who treated him with great honor. When I was introduced to him as his daughter who had been living in America, he looked at me carefully, almost as though he was studying me for the first time. He said a few words of welcome, but they were formal and distant, lacking the love I had hoped for. I realized quickly that I was not there because he wanted to reconnect with me. I was there because appearances mattered, and he needed all his children present for his coronation. It stung, but I stayed quiet and tried to take in the moment. Around me, more than 20 of my siblings celebrated, laughing and singing, while I stood there wondering if I truly belonged in this family. The coronation itself was grand. Traditional rulers, politicians, and religious leaders came from different states to witness it. My father was dressed in regal robes and crowned with dignity as people cheered and praised him. It was clear that his influence stretched far beyond his hometown. To the public eye, it was a moment of triumph. But deep inside me, I still carried emptiness. This was the man who had given me wealth but not love, status but not presence. I looked around at my siblings who seemed content to celebrate, and I wondered how many of them felt the same way. Still, I chose to be respectful and share in the joy of the occasion, never expecting that a dark twist was coming. After the celebrations, my father gathered us inside the palace for a family meeting. The atmosphere shifted from joy to seriousness. He stood up and announced that as emir, it was his duty to ensure his children carried on his legacy of honor and obedience to Islam. Then he dropped a bombshell that shook me to my core. He said I was to be given in marriage to the son of a wealthy imam from Niger State. It was presented as a done deal, a gift that would strengthen ties between 2 powerful families. My siblings clapped and nodded in agreement, and some of the elders praised his wisdom. But my heart sank. This was not a marriage proposal, it was a transaction, and I was the prize being handed over. I froze for a moment, struggling to process what had just happened. I had never even met this man they were talking about, yet I was expected to marry him simply because it suited the family's image. All the joy of being reunited with my family disappeared instantly. My mother looked at me with pleading eyes, urging me silently to comply, but I couldn't. Everything inside me rebelled against it. I had lived in the US most of my life. I had tasted freedom, made my own choices, and above all, I was now a Christian. There was no way I could submit to such a demand. Slowly, I stood up in the middle of the gathering. With a steady voice, I said I would not marry the imam's son, nor would I allow anyone to choose my future for me. My refusal shocked the entire room. Murmurs spread quickly, and my father's face hardened in anger. But for the first time in my life, I stood firm, ready to defend my freedom, no matter the cost. When I refused the marriage, my decision was met with silence at first, then with a storm of voices pressing me to reconsider. My mother pulled me aside that night and begged me with tears in her eyes. She told me I was putting myself in great danger, that disobedience to my father was the same as disobedience to Allah, and that no good would come from it. My siblings joined in, each of them taking turns to lecture me. They reminded me of the wealth, comfort, and privileges I had always enjoyed as the daughter of a powerful man. They insisted I should not throw all of it away because of what they called Western ideas. Some even mocked me for spending so many years in America, saying it had poisoned my mind. But deep down, I knew this had nothing to do with America. It had everything to do with Jesus. The pressure grew worse in the following days. My father called in some of his trusted imams to speak with me, hoping they would reason me back into Islam. They quoted verses from the Quran about obedience, loyalty, and punishment for those who leave Islam. They painted a picture of hell waiting for anyone who abandoned the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. Each time they spoke, they expected me to bow my head in shame, but instead I felt the fire of faith rise stronger inside me. When I thought of how Jesus and his people had embraced me during my darkest days of depression, I could not betray him. I could not deny the peace he had given me, the dignity he restored, and the love I had never received from my own family. For the first time in my life, I spoke with boldness. I am no longer a Muslim. I am a Christian, a child of God. Jesus is my Lord, and I will not turn back. The moment those words left my lips, the whole room erupted. My siblings gasped in disbelief. My mother wept loudly, and the imams shook their heads in anger. My father's face grew red with fury, and he stood up slowly, his voice shaking with rage. He declared that in his house, no child of his would ever follow Jesus. He said it was an insult to his name, an embarrassment to his reputation as a Muslim leader, and a betrayal of his bloodline. His words pierced me, but I stood tall. I told him the truth, that for years he had abandoned me, thinking money could replace his love. When depression almost swallowed me, it was not Islam or his wealth that saved me. It was Jesus and the love of Christians who stood by me. I reminded him that when he ignored me for nearly 2 decades, it was Jesus who gave me a reason to live again. My defiance only fueled his anger further. My father summoned all his wives, chiefs, children, and imams to the palace courtyard the next day. Word spread quickly, and the place was filled with people eager to witness what would happen. I was brought into the center of the gathering and made to stand before them all. The imams took turns condemning me, calling me rebellious and cursed. My siblings avoided my eyes, ashamed or afraid to be seen supporting me. My mother wept in the corner, pleading silently for me to change my words. But my heart was set. I lifted my voice and repeated boldly, I am a Christian and I will not deny Jesus. The courtyard fell silent for a moment. My father's face was like stone, unbending and unforgiving. It was then that he gave his final ultimatum, words that echoed through my ears like thunder. He said, you must choose today. Either you renounce Jesus and return to Islam, or you will lose your left eye. Choose between Jesus and your eye. Gasps filled the air as people struggled to believe what they had just heard. My siblings cried out, begging him to show mercy. Some imams nodded in approval, saying this was the only way to deal with apostasy. My mother collapsed to the ground, crying uncontrollably. But in that moment, as I stood there in the middle of everyone, I felt the presence of Jesus with me. I remembered his words in Matthew 10 verses 37 to 39. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. With strength I never knew I had, I looked straight at my father and said, I choose Jesus. When I declared before everyone that I chose Jesus, I felt the atmosphere shift. A heavy silence fell, but it was soon broken by angry voices shouting against me. My father stood shaking with rage, pointing at me as if I were no longer his daughter. I lifted my voice boldly and said what had been buried in my heart for years. You left me without love, without care, thinking money was enough. You never held me when I cried. You never showed me what a father's heart feels like. It was Christians who stood by me, who prayed with me, who treated me with dignity. They never asked me to change before they loved me. That is what made me see the truth. You abandoned me, but Jesus never did. My words fell like fire in the gathering, and though my mother sobbed bitterly, I knew the truth had to be spoken. The chiefs and imams reacted with disgust, accusing me of disrespecting my father publicly. My siblings lowered their heads, ashamed to be associated with me, while some of them whispered insults under their breath. My father ordered the guards to drag me to the village square immediately for punishment. That evening, before a crowd of villagers who had gathered to watch, I was forced to kneel in the dirt. A man with a cane stepped forward, and the sentence was declared, 21 lashes for dishonoring my father and insulting Islam by claiming Jesus. I prayed silently, asking God for strength. When the first stroke landed on my back, the pain burned like fire. Each lash tore through my skin, but with every strike, I whispered, Jesus, you are worth it. By the 21st stroke, I was weak, bruised, and trembling, but my spirit was stronger than ever. I had borne my cross openly, and I felt heaven watching. The next morning, my father wasted no time in carrying his threat further. I was taken under guard to the Sharia court. The judge sat high, flanked by imams and elders who knew my father well. My case was presented as a grave act of apostasy, a shame to Islam, and to the honor of my family. The judge looked at me with cold eyes and asked if I would renounce Jesus. I said clearly no. Jesus is my Lord, and I will never deny him. The room erupted in shouts of anger. The judge struck the table and pronounced the judgment. Her left eye will be removed. I shivered but did not flinch. My body shook at the thought, but my soul held firm. I remembered Luke 9 verse 62, where Jesus said, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." They gave me 3 days before carrying out the sentence, locking me in a small, bare room with guards watching. My mother tried to visit, pleading with me through tears to reconsider, but I told her gently, "I have peace in Jesus. Even if they take my eye, they cannot take him from me." On the third day, I was taken to a crude hospital under the watch of both guards and an imam. The surgeon looked at me with pity, but he said nothing. They tied me down and began the procedure. The pain was unbearable as my left eye was removed, and I screamed until my voice broke. But even in that agony, I prayed, "Lord, you suffered far more for me. I will not turn back." When it was over, bandages covered half my face, and I felt the hollow ache of loss. But deep inside, I felt closer to Jesus than ever before. When the punishment was complete, my father made another decree. I was to be banished from the town. My passport was seized, cutting me off from any return to the United States. They wanted me hidden, silenced, and contained. I was sent under guard to Lagos, placed in a large house my father owned, but it was no freedom. Security watched me constantly, ensuring I could not leave. It was a house arrest, a prison without bars. I was cut off from my Christian friends in America, my phones and laptop taken away. Yet even in that isolation, I found a small mercy. My father allowed me one monitored phone, thinking it would keep me under control. What he did not realize was that this phone became my lifeline. I used it to read the Bible and watch sermons on YouTube. I had lost an eye, but I had gained sight of eternity. I was banished, but I was not abandoned. Jesus was with me, and that was enough. My name is Aisha, and though I now live with only one eye, I can boldly say I am more free than I have ever been. After my banishment from my father's home and being placed under house arrest in Lagos, my world shrank into a single building, guarded and monitored day and night. I was cut off from my old life in the United States, cut off from my friends, my church community, and the fellowship that had once given me so much comfort. My passport was gone, my bank accounts were frozen, and every part of me that once lived without restriction was now chained to rules, suspicion, and constant surveillance. Yet inside that confinement, I experienced something I had never known in all my years of wealth and freedom. My spirit found liberty in Christ Jesus, and no guard or locked gate could take that from me. At first, the silence of my new life weighed heavily on me. I had lived in cities where voices, laughter, and friendships filled the air around me. Now all I heard was the movement of guards outside my door and the creak of doors opening and closing when meals were dropped in. My only possession of value was the monitored phone I had been given, which my father allowed only so he could keep an eye on my activities. But God turned what my father meant for control into a tool of freedom. That small device became my Bible, my fellowship, and my connection to the body of Christ. I downloaded Bible apps and daily devotionals, and I spent hours reading passages that once felt distant, but now came alive with power. I listened to sermons on YouTube, sometimes at night under my blanket when I feared the guards might report me. Those words gave me strength, courage, and the assurance that even in confinement, I was never truly alone. The greatest miracle of all was the healing that came to my heart. Before I found Jesus, even when I had everything the world could offer, money, education, and freedom, I had lived with depression that nearly crushed me. My life in America was full of empty moments where I wondered why I even existed. Now here I was, stripped of everything, even an eye, and yet I had no depression. Instead, I felt peace, a joy I could not explain in human terms. Each day I woke with gratitude, not for the guards or the walls, but for the presence of Christ within me. I sang softly to myself, hymns I had learned in my campus fellowship, and tears of joy often rolled down my cheeks. I realized the words of 2 Corinthians 4 verse 16 were true. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. My outward body bore scars, but my spirit was flourishing in the love of God. I began to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The child who once thought money was love, the teenager who never knew her father's embrace, the student who tasted depression even in abundance. All of that life felt so far away. In its place stood a woman who now knew Jesus in a way she had never imagined possible. My left eye was gone, yet my inner sight was clearer than it had ever been. I had experienced firsthand that following Jesus comes with a cost, but that cost is nothing compared to the treasure of knowing him. I saw how the Christian faith values women, lifting them up as daughters of God, not as second-class beings to be controlled or silenced. I remembered how my fellowship in America welcomed me with my hijab, prayed for me without condition, and loved me until my depression lifted. That was the love of Christ, a love stronger than any fear. Today, as I sit in this house, watched by guards but embraced by the Spirit of God, I can boldly declare that my faith has never been stronger. I am living proof that true freedom is not about movement or possessions, but about who rules your heart. I know many Muslims, especially women, are trapped in the same system that once held me, a system where your worth is measured only by obedience, silence, and sacrifice to men who use religion to control. To you, my sisters, I say Jesus sees you. He loves you, not as servants, but as precious daughters. He will never abandon you, even if your own family does. If they strip you of wealth, freedom, or even parts of your body, Jesus will still give you life that cannot be stolen. I lost an eye, but I gained eternal vision. Choose Christ, no matter the cost, for he is worth everything. I know many of you watching this will be angry about my story. You may wonder why the Nigerian government did nothing, or why you never saw a case like mine in the news. You must understand, this is Nigeria. Many things happen here that never make the headlines. Christians are attacked, beaten, and killed, especially in the northern states, but only a few of these stories ever reach the press. What happened to me is not an exception. It is part of the silent suffering many believers go through for choosing Jesus. I am one of the few who live to tell my story, but there are countless others whose names will never be known. I am not here to seek pity or to blame anyone. What I ask for is your prayers. Pray for those of us in Nigeria who are persecuted daily for our faith. Pray for the women hidden in villages, punished for believing in Jesus. Pray for the young men whose families reject them for following Christ. Our hope is not in governments, but in God. It is only his strength and the prayers of the faithful that keep us standing. Even now, under house arrest, I feel the power of those prayers. I believe that one day, God will give me full freedom. But until then, I will keep serving him with joy, even with one eye. If you are a Muslim watching this, I beg you to consider the truth I found. Jesus is alive, and he is worth losing everything for. Do not fear the threats of men. Do not fear what they can take from your body. Fear God alone and trust in his Son. In Matthew 10 verse 28, Jesus said, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell." I lost my eye, but my soul is safe with Christ. And that is all that matters. My prayer is that my story will give courage to others who are afraid to stand for Jesus. He will never leave you and he will never fail you. Choose him today, whatever the cost, and you will find life greater than anything this world can offer.